Violet Baker's pulse quickened as she gripped her wine glass, watching Preston Curtis's mother dismiss the waitress with a flick of her bony wrist. The poor server, barely out of her teens, blinked back tears as she scurried away from their table. Honestly, the help these days, Marilyn Curtis sighed dramatically. I don't know why you suggested this restaurant, Preston. The Four Seasons has much better service. Violet had been dating Preston for only 6 weeks, not nearly long enough to justify enduring this family dinner from hell. But she'd agreed because he'd seemed so nervous about it, those gentle brown eyes pleading with her. Now she understood why. His mother had spent the entire evening making passive-aggressive comments about everything from Violet's teaching career. Such a noble profession, though I imagine the pay is dreadful to her vintage dress. How economical of you. Preston shifted uncomfortably beside her, his gaze fixed on his plate. Mom, the food here is excellent. His father, Charles Curtis, barely looked up from his phone. Your mother prefers the ambience at the Four Seasons, you know that. Violet had expected a pleasant evening getting to know Preston's family. Instead, she was watching this strange dynamic play out, his parents cutting him down at every opportunity while his sister Penelope nodded along, occasionally adding her own barbed comments. Preston tells me you teach 4th grade, Violet, Penelope said, swirling her martini. How do you deal with those sticky little monsters all day? I couldn't bear it. I love my students, Violet replied evenly. They're curious, honest, and kind, all wonderful qualities. The implication hung in the air. Preston's hand found hers under the table, giving it a gentle squeeze. Well, not everyone is suited for the corporate world, Marilyn sniffed. Preston almost wasn't. Remember that ridiculous startup idea you had before your father set you straight? What was it again? Some kind of shipping concept? Preston's jaw tightened. It was a global logistics platform that, yes, that's right, Charles interrupted, finally putting his phone down. Waste of time. Best decision you ever made was abandoning that fantasy and joining the family business. Violet felt Preston tense beside her. She'd never seen him like this. The confident, warm man she'd been falling for seemed to have disappeared, replaced by someone who barely spoke above a whisper. The shipping idea actually sounds fascinating, Violet offered. What made you interested in logistics, Preston? Before he could answer, Marilyn laughed. Oh dear, don't encourage him. Preston has always had impractical ideas. If it weren't for us guiding him, he'd probably be living in some apartment eating ramen noodles. The young waitress returned with their entrees, her hands visibly shaking as she placed Marilyn's plate in front of her. This isn't what I ordered, Marilyn declared, though Violet was certain it was exactly what she had requested, and it's practically cold. I'm so sorry, madam. I can take it back right away, don't bother, I'll eat it, but I expect it to be removed from our bill. The waitress nodded, blinking rapidly. Yes, madam, of course, something in Violet snapped. 6 weeks of dating Preston had shown her a gentle, thoughtful man who listened intently when she talked about her students, who remembered her coffee order, who helped an elderly neighbor carry groceries without being asked. The disconnect between that Preston and this cowed version sitting beside his toxic family was too much to bear. Actually, Violet said, placing her napkin on the table, the food is perfectly fine and it's exactly what you ordered. I heard you very clearly ask for the sea base with lemon butter sauce. The table fell silent. Preston's eyes widened. I beg your pardon, Marilyn's voice dropped dangerously. I'm simply pointing out that you're being unnecessarily cruel to someone who's just trying to do her job. And from what I've seen tonight, it seems to be a pattern. Charles Curtis's face reddened. Young lady, you have no idea who you're speaking to. I know exactly who I'm speaking to. Parents who seem determined to undermine their son's confidence and belittle his achievements. Preston is one of the kindest, most intelligent men I've ever met, and if you can't see that, then I feel sorry for you. Penelope gasped. The audacity, no, the audacity is watching you all tear down someone as wonderful as Preston and expecting me to sit here quietly while you do it. Violet turned to the waitress. The food is delicious, and you've been nothing but professional despite difficult circumstances. The waitress gave her a grateful smile. Violet stood, her legs shaking but her voice steady. I think I've had enough family bonding for one evening. Preston, I'll catch a cab home. She grabbed her purse and walked out, heart pounding, half expecting, hoping that Preston would follow. When she reached the sidewalk outside, the cool evening air hit her flushed face. Had she overreacted? Maybe. But she couldn't regret standing up for that waitress or for Preston. Violet, wait. She turned to see Preston jogging toward her, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry, they both blurted at the same time. Preston ran a hand through his dark hair. Why are you sorry? You were amazing in there. No one's ever stood up to them like that. I embarrassed you in front of your family. I had no right to. You had every right. He stepped closer. Everything you said was true. I've been letting them dictate my life for so long that I forgot what it's like to have someone in my corner. A taxi pulled up to the curb, but Preston waved it away. Let me walk you home. It's only a few blocks, and I'd like to explain some things. Violet nodded, and they began walking in companionable silence. The city hummed around them, streetlights casting long shadows. So, Violet finally said, I'm guessing family dinners aren't your favorite activity. Preston laughed, a genuine sound that made her heart flutter. Not exactly. Look, what you saw tonight, that's why I've been avoiding introducing you to them. They're challenging, toxic. And I've never been strong enough to stand up to them. He stopped walking, turning to face her. My father built Curtis Global from nothing. Shipping, logistics, supply chain management, they have contracts with governments and corporations all over the world. It's his life's work, and from the day I was born, it was made clear that it would be mine too. But you had other ideas, the startup they mentioned. Preston's eyes lit up. ShipSync. It was an algorithm that could revolutionize how goods move across borders more efficient, more environmentally friendly. I was working with an amazing team. We had early investors lined up, and then, your parents intervened. My father threatened to cut me off completely. Not just financially, he said he'd make sure no one in the industry would touch me. He has that kind of power. Preston sighed. So I gave in. Abandoned my team, took a VP position at Curtis Global. That was 3 years ago. They resumed walking, turning down a quieter residential street. Is that why you never talk about your work? Violet asked. She'd noticed how Preston changed the subject whenever his job came up. I hate it. Every day feels like a compromise. The only good thing that's happened to me lately is meeting you. Violet felt her cheeks warm. At a coffee shop with a broken espresso machine. Best delayed latte of my life, he said with a smile, then his expression grew serious again. There's something else I should tell you, something I've been avoiding because I was afraid it would change how you see me. They reached Violet's apartment building, a modest brownstone with window boxes full of geraniums. She turned to face him, waiting. Preston took a deep breath. When my grandfather died, he left me a significant trust fund, one that even my father can't touch. I've been using it to secretly fund ShipSync's development with my old team. The company is actually launching next month. Preston, that's wonderful. Why would that change how I see you? He looked down. Because the trust fund isn't small, and with ShipSync's projected valuation. Violet, I'm what people would call wealthy, very wealthy. Violet blinked. How wealthy are we talking? Billionaire territory, he admitted quietly. The Curtis family has money, but most of it is tied up in the company. My grandfather wanted to make sure I'd be independent, so he set aside his personal fortune for me. I've never touched it until ShipSync. Violet leaned against her building's stone facade, processing this information. So when your mother made that comment about ramen noodles? Complete nonsense. I could buy the ramen company if I wanted to. He smiled weakly. I don't flaunt my wealth because I've seen what money does to people. My parents, their friends' money is all they care about. I wanted you to know me, not my bank account. Violet reached for his hand. I do know you. You're the guy who brings me coffee during lunch breaks at school, who helped my student Miguel with his science project when his parents couldn't, who apologized to the busboy when your mother complained about water spots on the glasses. Preston's eyes softened. And you're the woman who just told off the terrifying Marilyn Curtis without flinching. I was definitely flinching on the inside. They both laughed, the tension of the evening dissolving. "Can I see you tomorrow?" Preston asked. "There's a farmer's market in the park, very low-key, I promise." "No billionaire stuff," Violet smiled. "I'd like that." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. Instead, she closed the distance between them. His lips were soft against hers, the kiss gentle but promising. "Good night, Violet Baker," he whispered when they parted. "Good night, Preston Curtis, secret billionaire." As promised, the next morning brought a farmer's market date with absolutely no billionaire stuff, except for Preston's insistence on buying every type of pastry they encountered for research purposes. They strolled through the park, sampling foods and talking about everything except his family. It wasn't until they sat on a bench overlooking a small pond that Preston brought up the previous night. "I called my parents this morning," he said, breaking off a piece of croissant. Violet tensed. "How did that go?" "About as well as you'd expect. My mother thinks you're unsuitable and my father suggested I'm going through a rebellious phase." He smiled. "But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they thought. I told them if they wanted me in their lives, they'd need to treat both you and me with respect." "Bold move," Violet said, impressed. "I also told them about Ship Sync launching next month, and that I'm resigning from Curtis Global." Violet nearly choked on her coffee. "Wow. How did they take that?" "My father threatened to disown me, again." Preston shrugged. "It might have worked 3 years ago, but now I just feel free." Over the next few weeks, Violet watched Preston transform. The man who had seemed subdued at that family dinner was gone, replaced by someone vibrant and decisive. He spent long hours at the Ship Sync office, coming to life when he talked about the project. He introduced Violet to his team, a diverse group of engineers and logistics experts who obviously respected him not for his money, but for his vision. And through it all, he made time for her. He'd show up at her classroom with lunch, help grade papers, or simply listen as she talked about her day. He met her small circle of friends and charmed them all not with expensive gestures, but with genuine interest in their lives. 1 month after the disastrous family dinner, Preston invited Violet to Ship Sync's launch party. It was being held at a renovated warehouse space that now served as their headquarters. "Are you sure?" Violet asked as they walked hand in hand toward the building. "This is your big night. I don't want to distract from that." Preston stopped and turned to her. "You're not a distraction, Violet. You're the reason I finally found the courage to do this. I want you by my side." The launch was a resounding success. Investors mingled with tech journalists and industry experts, all buzzing about Ship Sync's potential to disrupt global shipping. Preston gave a brief speech that had everyone in the room captivated, including Violet, who watched from the side, bursting with pride. "You never told me he was such a visionary," a woman's voice said beside her. Violet turned to find a sleek, older woman in an impeccable suit watching Preston. "Excuse me, Preston. I've known him since he was in diapers and I never saw this coming. Charles always made him seem so conventional." Realization dawned. "You know Preston's father, unfortunately." The woman extended her hand. "Victoria Reed. I was Charles's main competitor until I sold my company last year. Now I'm just a bored retiree looking for investment opportunities." She nodded toward Preston. "And that young man just found himself a significant one." As the evening wound down, Preston made his way back to Violet, eyes bright with excitement. "We did it. 4 major shipping companies want to license the technology, and Victoria Reed, did you meet her? She's offering seed funding for our next phase of development." Violet kissed him. "I'm so proud of you. There's just one thing missing to make this night perfect." Preston took her hand. "Come with me." He led her up to the roof of the building, where someone had set up string lights and a small table with champagne. The city's skyline glittered around them. "Slightly billionaire-ish," Violet teased, gesturing at the setup. "Just slightly," Preston agreed with a grin. "But the view is worth it." They stood by the railing, looking out at the city. Preston seemed nervous suddenly, fidgeting with his champagne glass. "Everything okay?" Violet asked. "Better than okay. Violet, these past 2 months have been the best of my life. Meeting you changed everything, how I see myself, what I want for my future." You did all this yourself, she said, gesturing toward the party below. You had the vision and the courage all along. But you helped me find it again. He set down his glass. I know it hasn't been long, but sometimes when you know, you just know. I'm not proposing not yet, but I wanted to give you this. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a delicate silver key on a chain. It's symbolic, he explained. I'm building a house outside the city. Nothing ostentatious, just somewhere peaceful with a garden for your students to visit and rooms filled with light. I want you to help design it, make it ours, if you want to. No pressure, but Violet kissed him, cutting off his nervous ramble. I love it, and I love you. Preston's face lit up. You do? I do. Even when you were sitting silently at that horrible dinner, I knew there was something special about you, not your money. He pulled her close. I love you too, more than I thought possible. 6 months later, Preston's parents finally requested a meeting. It had been half a year of silence from the Curtis family while Preston's company flourished and his relationship with Violet deepened. They had moved into a temporary apartment together while their house was being built, falling into an easy domesticity that felt right to both of them. We don't have to go, Preston said as they dressed for dinner at his parents' penthouse. Ship Sync just landed the Anderson contract without their connections. We don't need them. Violet adjusted his tie. True, but they're still your family. If there's a chance to heal that relationship, it's worth trying. The penthouse was exactly as intimidating as Violet had imagined. All sleek surfaces and priceless art, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing panoramic city views. Marilyn Curtis greeted them with stiff politeness, while Charles remained in his study until dinner was served. The meal began in awkward silence. Finally, Charles cleared his throat. The Anderson contract was impressive, he said grudgingly. Your mother and I have been following Ship Sync's progress. Preston nodded cautiously. Thank you, it's been a good first year. Better than good, Charles continued. Which is why I wanted to talk to you about a potential partnership between Curtis Global and Ship Sync. Preston's eyebrows shot up. A partnership? Your technology complements our infrastructure. Together, we could dominate the market. Charles leaned forward. We're prepared to make a very generous offer. Marilyn turned to Violet with a tight smile, and we wanted to apologize for our behavior at our last dinner. It was unbecoming. Violet nodded politely, though she noticed the apology lacked any real warmth. We've had time to reflect, Marilyn continued. Preston clearly cares for you, and we should respect that. Perhaps we could start fresh. Something in her tone made Violet uneasy. She glanced at Preston, who was studying his parents with narrowed eyes. Let me guess, he said slowly. You've learned that Victoria Reed is backing Ship Sync's expansion into Asia, and suddenly you're interested in what I'm building. This isn't about respecting my choices, it's about protecting Curtis Global's market share. Charles's expression hardened. Business is business, Preston. I'm offering you legitimacy. I don't need your legitimacy, Preston interrupted. Ship Sync is already profitable and growing faster than Curtis Global ever did in its early years. As for starting fresh, he looked at his mother. An apology that only comes when you want something isn't really an apology at all. Marilyn's fake smile vanished. I see she's still influencing you against your family. No, Violet said firmly. Preston makes his own decisions. I'm just here to support him, whatever he chooses. Preston reached for her hand under the table. That's the difference between you and Violet, he told his parents. She believes in me unconditionally. You only support me when it serves your interests. Charles slammed his hand on the table. This is business, not some romantic fantasy. You've built something valuable, I'll give you that, but without Curtis Global's resources, you'll hit a ceiling. Maybe, Preston conceded. But I'd rather build something meaningful my way than succeed on your terms. He stood, helping Violet with her chair. Thank you for dinner. If you ever want to have a real relationship, one that isn't transactional, you know where to find us. Outside, in the privacy of their car, Preston let out a long breath. That went about as well as expected. Violet squeezed his hand. Are you okay? Actually, yes. He looked surprised at his own answer. A year ago, walking away from their approval would have devastated me. Now it just feels like the right choice. Because it is, Violet said. You're building something remarkable, Preston, and I don't just mean ship sink. He smiled, understanding her meaning. We are, aren't we? Their new house was completed 2 months later, a modern but warm structure nestled among trees, with the garden Violet had wanted for her students and a home office where Preston could work when he wasn't at Ship Sink headquarters. It was luxurious without being ostentatious, exactly as he'd promised. On their first night there, Preston led Violet to the back patio, where dinner waited under the stars. Slightly billionaire-ish again, she teased, taking in the private chef's creations and the bottle of champagne. Special occasion, he explained, suddenly looking nervous. I actually have something to ask you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Violet's breath caught as he dropped to one knee. Violet Baker, you changed my life the moment you stood up to my family and showed me what real courage looks like. Every day with you reminds me of what truly matters: kindness, integrity, purpose. I don't care if we live in this house or a studio apartment as long as we're together. He opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald ring. Will you marry me? Tears blurred Violet's vision. Yes, she whispered. Absolutely yes. Their wedding the following spring was everything they wanted: intimate and joyful, held in the garden of their new home with Violet's students releasing butterflies as they exchanged vows. Preston's parents didn't attend, but his team from Ship Sink did, along with Violet's friends and family. Victoria Reed came too, now firmly established as Preston's mentor and Ship Sink's most vocal champion. As the reception wound down, she found the couple swaying together on the dance floor. Congratulations, you two, she said. Preston, your company's changing the industry. And Violet, you've clearly changed him for the better. Preston smiled down at his new wife. She helped me find the courage to be myself. All I did was see you clearly, Violet corrected. You did the rest. Victoria raised her glass, to seeing clearly then. And to building something that lasts. As Victoria moved away, Preston pulled Violet closer. You know, that night you stood up to my family, I was terrified you'd walk away and never look back. I wouldn't have blamed you. I almost did, Violet admitted. But there was something about you, something worth fighting for. Thank you for fighting for me, he murmured against her hair. Always, she promised. Though I still can't believe I told off a billionaire's mother at my first family dinner, Preston laughed. Best dinner of my life, despite everything. It was the first time anyone ever put my happiness above my family's approval. He spun her in a gentle circle. I promise to spend the rest of our lives making sure you never regret it. I already know I won't, Violet said, rising on her toes to kiss him as their guests applauded. 5 years later, their family had grown. Twins James and Lily raced around the garden while their parents watched from the patio. Ship Sink had revolutionized global logistics, just as Preston had envisioned, and Violet had opened a progressive elementary school that welcomed students regardless of their ability to pay, funded in part by the charitable foundation she and Preston had established. Did you ever imagine this? Violet asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder as they watched their children play. That night when I stormed out of the restaurant, Preston smiled, wrapping his arm around her. Not in my wildest dreams, but looking back, I think that's when everything changed. When you stood up for me, you showed me I was worth standing up for. You always were, Violet said. You just needed a reminder. In the distance, a car approached their long driveway. Are we expecting someone? Violet asked. Preston shook his head, squinting toward the vehicle. As it drew closer, his expression changed. It's my parents. Violet straightened. After all this time, what do you think they want? I don't know, Preston admitted, but whatever it is, we'll face it together. He reached for her hand, finding the strength that had been there all along, the strength she had helped him rediscover that night when everything changed. No matter what his parents wanted, Preston knew the most valuable thing he possessed wasn't his billions or his successful company. It was the life he and Violet had built together, founded on courage, compassion, and the simple power of standing up for what matters most.